Bonnie Tyler, the Welsh singer who became one of Britain's greatest voices, said those words about a moment in 1976, lying in recovery after throat surgery, under strict orders not to speak a single word for 6 weeks. She was 25 years old, one hit into her career, and terrified. And then she broke the one rule that mattered. She screamed. Her specialist told her, "You've really gone and done it now. You're going to be more husky." What sounded like a career-ending mistake became the most famous rasp in the history of popular music, the voice behind It's a Heartache, holding out for a hero, and a song that still stops time whenever it plays, Total Eclipse of the Heart. On Wednesday night, July 8th, that voice fell silent. Bonnie Tyler died in a hospital in Faro, Portugal, at 75 years old, with her husband of 53 years at her side, the same man she called love at first sight when she was 17. This is what really happened to Bonnie Tyler, the coal miner's daughter who turned an accident into an anthem. Stay with me because the story of her final months, and the promise she made just before the end, says everything about who she really was. She was born Gaynor Hopkins in 1951, in the village of Skewen, Wales, about 7 miles outside Swansea. Her father was a coal miner. Her mother kept a home filled with 6 children in public housing, a house with an outside toilet. There was no money. There were no connections. There was only a radio, and a mother who loved opera, and a little girl who sang along to everything. Gaynor left school with no qualifications. She took a job in a grocery store, ringing up shopping for the same neighbors she'd known all her life. And that might have been the whole story, except for a local talent contest, where a voice came out of that grocery store girl that made the room go quiet. She spent nearly a decade singing in the working men's clubs and pubs of South Wales. Smoky rooms, tiny stages, audiences who would talk right through you if you couldn't hold them. It was the hardest apprenticeship in show business, and it taught her something no vocal coach ever could: how to make every single person in the room feel like the song was about them. Along the way, at 17, she met a young athlete named Robert Sullivan, a judo competitor who would represent Great Britain at the Olympic Games in 1972. She called it love at first sight. They married in 1973, and he never left her side again. Remember that. It matters at the end of this story. In 1976, the record industry finally found her. Songwriters and producers Ronnie Scott and Steve Wolfe brought her to RCA Records, and her single Lost in France climbed to number 9 on the United Kingdom charts and put her on top of the pops. Gaynor Hopkins from Skewen was gone. Bonnie Tyler had arrived, and then, almost immediately, it all nearly ended. Just as Lost in France took off, Bonnie developed a persistent sore throat that wouldn't go away. Doctors found nodules on her vocal cords, the singer's nightmare, caused by years of strain in those loud Welsh clubs. Surgery was the only option. The operation itself went fine. The instructions afterward were simple and absolute: total silence for 6 weeks, not a word, not a whisper. But Bonnie Tyler, by her own cheerful admission, was a chatterbox. "You're not supposed to talk for 6 weeks after the operation, but I found it very difficult," she confessed years later. "One day I just screamed out of frustration." One scream, her specialist was blunt. "You've really gone and done it now. You're going to be more husky." She believed her career was finished before it had begun. Then she walked back into the recording studio, opened her mouth, and the engineers stared. In her own words, they all said, "Bloody hell, where's that voice come from?" The sweet voice of Lost in France was gone. In its place was something torn, smoky, wounded, a voice that sounded like it had lived through every heartbreak it sang about. And in 1977, the whole world heard it. It's a Heartache climbed to number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 in America, a raw, aching record that critics compared to Rod Stewart. The mistake, the accident, the broken rule, it had become her fortune. But here's the part of the story most people never knew. After It's a Heartache, her label kept pushing her toward country-tinged pop, and by the early 80s Bonnie felt trapped. She didn't want to be a soft pop act. She wanted to make records that sounded like storms. So when she signed with a new label, she made one demand. A demand everyone told her was impossible. She wanted the man who built Meatloaf's Bat Out of Hell. Jim Steinman was rock and roll's great dramatist, a composer who wrote songs the size of cathedrals, producing orchestral walls of sound in the tradition of Phil Spector. but cranked to operatic extremes. Bat Out of Hell itself had been produced by Todd Rundgren, who captured Steinman's thunderous vision on tape. Steinman was hesitant to meet the Welsh singer at first. He was deep into his own solo album, Bad for Good, a record he'd originally conceived for Meat Loaf. Then he heard Bonnie's tapes, and he was captivated. He compared her to John Fogerty of Creedence Clearwater Revival, his favorite male rock singer, and said something that explains her entire career. Her voice isn't pure or smooth, it sounds ravaged, like it's been through a lot. It's what rock and roll is all about. The voice created by a scream had found the one writer on earth who understood it. Steinman brought her a song he'd started years earlier for a musical version of the vampire tale Nosferatu, a gothic stage piece he'd been developing for over a decade, and never finished. It was a 7-minute epic built as a call and response between Bonnie's dark, smoky lower register and singer Rory Dodd's soaring cry of "Turn Around, Bright Eyes." They recorded it at Power Station Studios in New York, where the size of the room matched the size of the song. Then they filmed the video in a gothic former asylum in Surrey, England, a place Bonnie herself called frightening. In 1983, Total Eclipse of the Heart went to #1 in both Britain and America. The album, Faster Than the Speed of Night, topped the charts. She earned a Grammy nomination for Best Female Pop Vocal Performance. The coal miner's daughter with the ruined voice was, for a moment, the biggest female rock singer on the planet. For years afterward, Meat Loaf claimed the song had been written for him, a claim both Steinman and Bonnie always denied. The song belonged to her, and everyone who heard it knew it. In 1984, she did it again with Holding Out for a Hero from the movie Footloose, another Steinman thunderstorm that has never once left the culture since, and the song kept finding new audiences. In 1995, dance artist Nikki French took Total Eclipse of the Heart back into the top 10 with a thumping Eurodance version, introducing the song to an entirely new generation. Proof that Steinman and Tyler had built something indestructible. And here is the beautiful, strange afterlife of that music. Every time a solar eclipse crosses the sky, Total Eclipse of the Heart surges back up the charts. Astronomy itself became her promoter. Very few artists ever record a song that becomes a permanent part of how humanity marks an event in the heavens. Bonnie Tyler did. Behind the anthems, there was a quieter story, and she told it herself with the same honesty she brought to everything. At 39, Bonnie suffered a miscarriage. She and Robert never had children. Her words about it were simple and devastating. "We just thought it wasn't meant to be." No bitterness, no self-pity, just a Welsh woman's steady grace about the hardest thing life handed her. Instead, she poured that love outward, into her marriage, her enormous extended family in Wales, and 5 decades of audiences who felt, every night, like they were the ones being sung to. And she never stopped. 18 studio albums. The United Kingdom's representative at the Eurovision Song Contest in 2013, made a member of the Order of the British Empire, an MBE, in the 2022 birthday honors for her services to music. Into her 70s, she was still touring the world, splitting her time between the Algarve coast of Portugal and her beloved Mumbles, back home near Swansea. This year, 2026, marked 50 years since Lost in France. She celebrated it the only way she knew how, a 30-date comeback tour, a sold-out night at the Belfast waterfront, dates across Europe, and the one she circled on the calendar, a homecoming show in Cardiff, Wales, this December. In one of her final interviews, she said, "I'm still rocking on that stage with my wonderful band, and if you've got your health, you've got everything." The end came cruelly fast. During a concert stop in London this spring, she began feeling unwell. Tests were inconclusive. She traveled home to the Algarve, where severe abdominal pain set in. According to a longtime family friend, her appendix had burst, and she was rushed to the hospital in Faro for emergency intestinal surgery in May. Complications followed. She was placed in a medically induced coma. Her team's update in mid-June was honest with fans. She was out of the coma, but remained very unwell, in intensive care. Through every one of those days, Robert Sullivan, the boy she met at 17, her husband of 53 years, was at the hospital from morning until night. A friend put it simply, he spends his days at the hospital and only comes home to sleep. On the night of July 8th, with Robert near, Bonnie Tyler slipped away. Her family's statement said they were heartbroken. that she passed unexpectedly from the illness she was being treated for. Tributes poured in within hours. Fellow Welsh icon Catherine Zeta-Jones, a relative of Robert's, wrote that her heart was broken. The British Prime Minister's office called her one of Britain's greatest recording artists, whose music continues to touch lives, flood dance floors, and fill karaoke booths. Flowers piled up outside her home in Swansea. Think about the shape of this life. A girl from a coal mining village, in a house with an outside toilet, who was told her voice was ruined, and answered by making that ruined voice immortal. A wife who found love at 17 and kept it for more than half a century. A woman who lost the child she hoped for, and gave that love to the whole world instead. Jim Steinman said her voice sounded like it had been through a lot. It had. That's exactly why we believed every word she sang. Somewhere tonight, an eclipse is coming, and when it does, we all know what song the world will play. Rest well, Bonnie. Turn around, bright eyes. If Bonnie Tyler's music was part of your life, share a memory in the comments. Which song is yours? And if you'd like more honest tributes to the legends of our era, you know where the subscribe button is. Thank you for spending this time with her and with us.